A woman? Oh dear, they're the worst kind.
Why is that, Father?
Who do you think created feminism, dear boy?
We are talking Beverly Hills Vamp from 1989, directed by schlock movie meister Fred Olen Ray. There has been tons of Beverly Hills something movies. Here's yet another. And this one stars Britt Ekland as our kind of mistress vampire, Eddie Deason. You've also got a couple of scream queens here in the forms of Michelle Bauer and Dawn Wildsmith. So this is kind of a low budget sex comedy, like teen sex comedy with a kind of, you know, the horror veneer. Now there's been plenty of sort of these low budget vampire kind of sex comedy type movies that came out around this time. This is one of the lower hanging fruits, you might say. And it focuses on this trio of geeks. Our main character, Eddie Deason, plays Kyle, and he's one of this trio. And they are aspiring filmmakers moved out to California in hopes of, you know, making a movie. And they end up going to a house of ill repute to try and, you know, get in that Californian life, as you do. Eddie Deason's character, Carl, has actually got a girlfriend, though. So whilst they're at this brothel, he excuses himself and goes back home, but unbeknownst to them, this brothel is actually home to a nest of vampires, and his two friends ultimately end up getting sort of turned. And now it's up to Kyle to try and well, save his friends if he can and defeat these vampires, all along with lots of kind of like semi-naked girls and cheap-ass jokes. What'll happen? You'll have to watch the movie and find out. Right then, let's discuss. So yes, many Beverly Hills comedies that you've probably seen. What works in this one? Not much, I'm not going to lie. It's a sort of, if you don't mind a bit of TNA, it's a somewhat kind of inoffensive you know, addition to the kind of the teen sex comedy that was kind of quite popular in the 80s. It doesn't go anything like too gratuitous here. You know, you get a little bit of boobs, you get a little bit of bum and stuff like that. Nothing too exciting really, that compared to like, some of the other ones. And there's a few kind of funny jokes here and there, some of which I expect won't fly today. There's one or two sort of funny jokes here. And, you know, it has the idea being that this kind of nest of vampires is actually a prostitute ring. And they are sort of somewhat controlling the police and stuff. You know, there's some sort of fun ideas here. We actually get a kind of prologue at the beginning with this kind of guy setting up this sort of the story with this kind of like lore of vampires, which I thought was quite fun. There's quite a fun scene involving this kind of priest who was a consultant on a kind of a previous sort of horror film. So there's a smattering of, you know, of kind of like mildly amusing scenes here and there, and you know, there's plenty of attractive women here. So you know, there's plenty of kind of, like I say, low hanging fruit. What doesn't work? The movie really doesn't have much going on, to be honest. It's kind of a little bit of a dull comedy, which is probably the worst thing you could possibly say. Now, comedy is subjective, so I didn't find this movie especially amusing, but there may be those of you who do. Now, I actually saw this movie back when it was sort of like not long after it had been released, and I didn't think it was much cop then. And I've re-watched it now for this review, and I still don't think it's much cop. As I say, there's one or two jokes, but the jokes aren't that thick and fast anyway, to be honest. And a lot of them are just kind of like groan-inducing, I have to be honest. The idea to have Eddie Deason to try and, he's like a kind of Pee Wee Herman style character in this, like this kind of like Hollywood ideal of what a nerd is, effectively. And he's just not an interesting character. He's not one you particularly kind of gravitate to or or feel sorry for or anything like that. It's just a really just like a walking nerd stereotype. And, you know, I think maybe the idea here was to make him the next Pee Wee Herman, but it never really materialised. He's been in a few films, but he never really sort of did more than kind of a few roles. I think he's in one of the Critters movies. Anyway, yeah, his character is just doesn't cut through, to be honest. And the rest of the sort of the characters are pretty much all sort of not particularly interesting anyway. Britt Ekland is our queen vampire, but she's barely in the movie. It's probably like a day's worth of shooting for her. I think she's in like 3 scenes, and she doesn't actually do anything. She just is there kind of like barking orders to some of the other kind of like female sort of vampires, but herself doesn't really do anything. And it's just to have that kind of name in the kind of the credits here. But like I said, the screen time is very minimal, and what she does on screen is probably you know, you could have taken her out of the movie and it wouldn't have made a difference. The movie ultimately is just a bit boring. The storyline isn't anything to write home about. The jokes are a hit and miss at best. So there's 1 or 2 that are kind of quite fun, especially when you get a few references to sort of like B movies or other kind of horror films and things like that. That's when I think this movie at its strongest. But the characters don't really cut through. The vampire makeup here is rudimentary at best. It really feels like this was probably a very sort of quick movie to kind of turn around, and it probably was. It's not one of my more beloved B movies, I have to say. I'm going to give this one a 3 out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment and I'll look forward to seeing you next time.